Hey guys, Matt here, and today we're going to talk about forehands. So I've seen some videos and read a lot of internet chatter about different theories on throwing forehands, and I want to give you my take on it. If you've watched this channel very much at all, you know that forehands is something I'm kind of a specialist at. I throw forehands on shots up to 500 feet, sometimes longer than that if I'm feeling good. And my backhand tops out around 425, a little bit further on a good day with a flippy disc. So I want to give you some forehand theory and a little bit of some tips and tricks on how you can throw a good forehand if you're either new to throwing them or new to the game in general, or maybe refine your approach a little bit if you've been playing a bit longer. So I want to start out with, I may not be able to make you throw 500 feet with a forehand, but I bet I can make your regular forehand a little bit better and more reliable. So the first thing I'll start out with is the type of disc you should use to learn a forehand. And a lot of people will say that you can use anything that you throw backhand, or you should use something really understable. Some people say you should throw something really overstable. And I kind of disagree with all three of those statements. Can you throw any disc forehand that you can throw backhand? Yes. But should you? There are definitely ones that are better than others. And I'll tell you why in a second. Throwing really understable discs can be good because you learn touch and you learn how to control a disc, but it also makes some of the angles trickier to manipulate, and I think is a lot harder on your long-term progress. And throwing a really overstable disc can mask a lot of form flaws and take you a little bit further in your learning process more quickly, but you're probably going to develop some bad habits that are harder to overcome, and you'll hit your ceiling a little bit sooner. So what I think is the best place to start is with a nice stable to very, very slightly overstable putt and approach disc like the Axiom Envy, Pro Discus Jokeri, the Atom from MVP, which is very similar to the Envy. There are a lot of great options. The Sensei from Discmania, the P2 is another good one, and anything that's going to go relatively straight for you and not be, clunky or really flippy or really overstable. I like the Envy the most because it has some traits that I think are great for a forehand disc. Typically when you're throwing a forehand, you want a pretty flat top, like this one basically has. Got a tiny bit of shoulder, but very flat. It doesn't really have a bead. Some Envies, the core protrudes out and has kind of a tiny bead, but you don't want a big bead usually in your forehands. I'll tell you why in just a minute. And the PLH, or the wing height, that's the part that sticks out the furthest of the rim, is relatively high. That means it's going to be stable to overstable and really nice to throw. So now that we have the type of disc I think you should be learning with, oh, A3 from Prodigy, that's another good one. It does have a little bit of a bead, but it comes out really nice. I think that we should talk about grip. So we're talking about a forehand grip. There's two main grips that you will see. The one that I use the most is the two-finger spread grip. That's where you put the pad of your middle finger on the rim with your pointer finger extended slightly towards the middle of the flight plate and your thumb just over the rim on top. So what that does is it gives you a really nice stable feel. The disc isn't going anywhere in my hand. You get a nice pinch there, and it allows you to release it flat or with a little bit of angle hyzer or anhyzer with a good deal of control. The other one you'll see a pretty good bit of is the two-finger stack grip. That's like your forehand power grip where you have two fingers on the rim. Now that can net you some more distance, but it's a little bit less firm and not quite as controllable. I throw almost all of my shots with the four-finger spread grip, which is kind of like the forehand fan grip, and I feel like it gives you a little bit more control. And I've thrown shots, 550 feet or more with that grip. I don't feel like you need that second finger that much for most people, although in theory the extra finger pad does give you more friction, so you can whip it a little bit harder and it should throw stable a little bit longer. So why I said that every disc you throw backhand is not necessarily the best disc for forehand is some of the things we talked about. The top may not be that flat, which isn't a deal breaker. It might have a big B like a rock. I don't love rocks for forehands. Amazing backhand disc for me, but I don't like throwing it with forehand because when you have it in that grip, a lot of times your ring finger will be cupped under here. So sometimes on the release, when you're hitting the release zone, that bead will just kind of rub up against your ring finger and can lead to a little bit of wobble. So that's why I don't love a beaded disc. And also, when you're throwing forehand, chances are, if you have any kind of athletic background, you're going to be able to throw the disc faster forehand. On average, until you get to the elite levels of player or certain types of athletes from other sports, your forehand is generally 10 miles an hour or so faster than your backhand. That is true for myself. I throw a forehand in the mid 70s. My best backhand tops out around 65. So what that does is it means since you only have 1 or 2 finger pads on the disc, it's not spinning as quick. The RPMs are lower, which will make it fade harder generally. And it's going faster, which will make it turn more to start with. So a lot of discs, they say, that's why some people say throw overstable, because coming out of your hand, it's gonna turn a little more than your backhand probably, but it's also usually gonna fade a little bit harder. So you have to find a disc and a method that's gonna work well for you with both of those factors coming in. Now I'm gonna go over how I set up to throw real quick and give you guys an idea on some fairly short shots on how you would set up. Okay, so when I'm throwing a forehand, I like to orient my body where I'm got my shoulder facing the target. On most shots, I'll take 1 step into my lie, into my mini or the front of the tee, and then try to keep the disc on a fairly level plane as soon as it's getting towards the release point. So a lot of people make the mistake to having a real big reach back. You're not throwing a baseball really. You don't need to separate to that degree. But if you point your front side and then make sure to keep the disc coming through without going too wide, you want to keep it fairly close to your body, and then level on the release, kind of like this. Okay, so that one was about a 220-foot straight approach style shot. I'm going to do it a little zoomed out like this so you can see what my whole body's doing a little bit better. Okay, so as you can see on that one, there's one thing I didn't really explain that well, and that is your follow through, which is really important. As you're coming through, a lot of people have the tendency to whip and stop right here, so it's like boom, and then they're almost moving away from the target. You want to come to your release point and then continue to follow through past it. So you're whipping and releasing out front, like you're slapping someone out in front of you in the face, where your hand's like, pow. And when that happens, you let your body follow through. Now, I didn't step off with that one because it was such a short shot. It was only 200 feet. But if you're trying to throw with any amount of power, you're pushing off your back foot and then through the target. Try not to let your body twist too much past it. You want to go over your front foot and let it travel that way. And that's how you're going to add power while keeping your disc and your body on the line. If you have your body on the line, the disc is likely going to be on the line too, as long as you don't give it too much angle one way or the other. And one thing I want to talk about that I hear is a lot of people talk about throwing palm up, and that's kind of a misnomer. What they mean is don't let your wrist roll. So as you're coming through, a lot of newer players have a tendency to let their wrist do like this a little bit. It's called wrist roll. So you're here and then it comes out like this. You get a lot of flutter and usually a little bit of anhyzer, sometimes more like down here and a whole lot of hyzer. You can usually tell because it'll be a real fluttery, torque heavy forehand, which I was definitely guilty of when I first started. But if you have that pinch fan grip, like we talked about, your palm's never really up, it's forward. If you uncurl your fingers there, your palm is facing towards your target. So you're whipping towards it like you're smacking somebody right here. Well, pow, out front. So you want to point that front side and then release. right there. And if you can do those things with a nice stable disc like an Envy, Jokerai, A3, something that's not too understable or overstable, that's a great start in learning your forehand game. Hope you guys enjoyed the video. Really appreciate it. Next time, we'll talk about adding some distance on those forehands. Thanks for watching.